Today we're going to work on cleaning up the engine block here. I just dropped the heads off the machine shop. They're going to be about 2 weeks before we get them back. So I'm just going to take the time today and get the block cleaned up. Right here you see I'm taking a towel and a flashlight, and I'm looking down in this oil galley, and I'm trying to get any little particles that may have fell in there when we lifted the heads off. When I lift the heads off. Now I'm going to shove some paper towels down in there because we're getting ready to clean the block, and I don't want the gasket material that we're removing off the cast iron block to get down in those oil galleys. That's right down in there is where the push rods go. I cover the other side with a fender washer so that when I'm using my die grinder, I'm not blowing crap over on that side and putting it down those oil galleys. These are all the head bolts I'm pointing out here, and we'll need to clean them out. We'll have to take a brake parts cleaner and a blowgun, and we'll have to get in there and get it all cleaned out. Now I just put a little piece of paper towel in the oil return down there just to try and keep some of the crap out of there. There is another one, but we're not getting close to it yet, and I'll plug that one up too. I like to use a die grinder. It works clockwise, so I'm trying to blow the crap away from the head. It's inevitable. I mean, you're still going to get some on it. It's important to know that when I'm using that die grinder, I'm not going very fast. I'm keeping the RPMs relatively slow, light pressure. Really what I don't want to see is sparks. If you see sparks, you're either going a little too fast or I'm pushing too hard. I got one spot where there's a speck of rust on a build up there, and I was working on it, and I got one spark to come off, and that was about the only time. It should be over here on the right hand side somewhere is where it was. But anyways, it looks like I'm really going after this hard, but I'm not. I'm going real light, taking my time, and I just want to make sure it's cleaned up real good. I'll wash it down a few times just to get the stuff off of it. I don't necessarily need to get the stains off the cast iron from the original gasket. I just need the material off, and there's a fine difference between the two. Here we're going to go around and blow out all the bolt holes, the head bolt holes. Very important. You want to make sure there's nothing in those holes. I like to take brake parts cleaner, spray them down, get the blowgun, blow it out, spray it again with brake parts cleaner, blow it out. Because what will happen is if you got oil or coolant in one of those bolt holes, and you go to put your bolt in and torque it, you'll torque it down and you'll hydrolock that hole, that threaded hole. And then the liquid, whatever's in there, can wick its way up the bolt. And once that pressure is relieved, well, now you're not torqued, so it's not accurate. So we want to make sure they're clean with nothing in them, and then you can take a bottom tap, thread chaser, and run in there and clean all the threads up real good. I'm taking a screwdriver here. It's just a real light, real small screwdriver, and I take it lightly over the marks on the head, and I want to make sure that I don't feel anything. No old gasket material. It's time consuming, I know. Probably not necessary, but it is what it is. Here I'm telling you that if you're going to use a die grinder, just be sure you keep that die grinder flat. You don't want to round off any of these surfaces. You just want to keep it nice and flat. 90 degrees to the surface is what you're after. That way, you're not taking away any materials. But there's one little spark there. I don't know why, but I didn't pull out the dowel plugs on this side. I did on the other side, and usually I pull the dowel plugs out, the dowel pins, and they're one in the front and one in the back, so when you set the head gasket on there, it goes there, and you set the head on, and it lines up perfectly. Normally I take vice grips, like needle nose, and I'll compress them dowel pins, pull them out, clean it up, and put them right back in. I don't know why I didn't do it on this side. I did on the other side, so here later, in a later video, I'll notice this, and I'll end up taking them off and cleaning them up real good. I like to inspect the cylinder walls too. It's a really good time to make sure that everything's okay. This is a machinist straight edge. This is for checking flat on a block. You see what I'm doing here? I went horizontal first, then I'm going crisscross, then I'm going to go like this, horizontal top to bottom every inch or so. Again, probably a little more than I need to, but whatever. I've got time today set aside. This is my whole plan today, is to get as much done on this and prepared. That feeler gauge is 1.5 thousandths is what it is. And all I'm doing is laying that straight edge flat on there and trying to get that feeler gauge to go under it anywhere. I used to have a 36-inch straight edge like this, and I couldn't find it. So I went out to Summit and picked it up. It was like 37 bucks. Well worth the investment. Now we're just about ready to move forward. I do the other side. I'm not going to bore you with the details. It's the same thing. Rinse and repeat. That's all there is to it. This side's just about ready. The block's all cleaned up. It's all ready to go as far as I want to right now. So I'm going to kind of switch gears here and start working on these air charge cooler pipes. They are an odd material. They're not steel. They're not aluminum. Sarge told me what they were, and I can't remember, but it's some kind of alloy. And they corrode like aluminum, but they will rust. And they just looked horrible. And I thought, you know what? Now's the time. I'm going to take a wire wheel, clean them all up real good, see what they look like, and see if we maybe want to paint them up. So here, take a look. You see what that looks like now. That's what it did look like. So I'm going to continue cleaning this up, and then we're going to give it a paint job. These things are cleaning up real easy. Light pressure with the wire wheel. I don't need a flapper disc or nothing. The wire wheel's working really well. But, you know, if I just clean this up and leave it, they're going to look bad again pretty quick. So I've decided I'm going to go ahead and clean them up real good, give them a couple coats of primer, that self-etching primer. And after that, we'll give them a couple coats of paint. Because I think the paint's probably going to look the best, the longest. And I'm not trying to cover up that these are old pipes. It's just, you know, sometimes it's just the details. You know, it looked horrible, and I was thinking that, you know, I could spend a little bit of time, see what it looks like. I'm going to hang them from this little thing I kind of vice grip together so we can get some paint on it. But, man, they cleaned up really easy, and I'm glad I did this because once I got them painted, I was very happy with the way they turned out. Okay. I'll get that hung up and get it cleaned up. I've got a makeshift A-frame going, or whatever you want to call it, jungle gym, so that I can paint these. I'll show you in just a minute. Let me get this hung up. Alright, so I've got them hung up here on my scaffold slash whatever, and I've wiped them down with lacquer thinner. And now we're going to use some primer. Give them a coat of primer, let that dry. I'm going to go get some lunch, and we'll come back and paint them. So I'm going to give these pipes 2 coats of primer. The first coat's kind of a tack coat. It's not going to be as heavy and as thick. I'm going to let that tack up, and once it's ready, then we'll go on with our second coat of primer, which would be a good solid, thorough coat of primer. Then I'm going to go off to lunch and let the primer dry. I'll come back and I'll do the same thing with the paint. It actually ends up getting 3 coats of paint on here. And this isn't, I want it to look like a new shiny penny. It's preservation. You know, I got these things off and they looked horrible under the hood. So I figured, you know, this just take a little time. I probably got less than an hour cleaning these up and painting them and doing all this. And I think it's well worth it. I think when we're all said and done, it makes a little bit nicer job. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it'll look horrible. I don't know. But in between all this, I'm still cleaning up parts. Now, there are some things that I need to order that I haven't ordered yet because I'm waiting to see how this comes together. Because if I run into a problem where there's something I missed and overlooked, I don't want to be spending money on things that don't have to be done and then be sitting there wishing I hadn't because there was some other more important things that we need to purchase. So I'm holding off on a few things. Not really a big deal. We'll be able to get those parts pretty quick. But I figure this way, if we paint all this stuff up now, then the paint has plenty of time to cure in the 2 weeks it's going to take before we get the heads back. Because we've got this and a few other, and again, this is preservation. The water neck from the crossover tube is flaking, like the paint's just coming off. So we're gonna get that cleaned up too, get it ready to go, and get it painted. We'll show you that here too.
All right, that's a little bit better look at the color. Actually, I kind of like it. It's called stainless. I think that's what it's called. There used to be a color called cast iron that I liked real well, but I haven't been able to see that in an aerosol can in quite a while. But I think I'm okay with that. We'll see how it looks in the truck. It's got to look better than just, you know, shiny gray.
So this is a crossover pipe that comes from one head to the other, and then it comes up in the middle, over top of the engine towards the driver's side, and then the top radiator hose hooks into it. When I took this off, it was in really bad shape. It was rusting from underneath the paint. So I looked into replacing it, and for the price that they want for just this pipe, it was just not cost effective. There's nothing wrong with the pipe except for the paint's coming off. So I decided to just wire wheel the whole thing, get it down to shiny metal, put on 2 coats of acrylic and self-etching primer, and 2 coats of paint. Because that's really, if I replace it, that's all I'm gaining. I'm going from a pipe that needs painted to a pipe that is painted. So I didn't buy it. I just cleaned this up, and now that keeps the budget just a little bit lower. And if we would happen to come across something else in the process of putting this back together that we didn't see, I didn't plan for, it helps us with the budget so that we can still afford to do the best repair possible by not spending money in places we shouldn't. You know, it's all about prioritizing where we put that money. The goal is to put it in the place where we get the biggest bang for the buck. Like if we're really deep into this motor like we are, and it needs something that is really easy at that point to replace or to repair or whatever, well, that's what we want to do. You don't want to be there and not do it because, oh, we got too much money in it. You know, you do the best repair we can do. And there's a couple things that we did order with the, you know, might as well, that type thing. And there's just a few things that we're going to replace that because we're there, and there's some other things that, you know, they just need to be replaced because, you know, they're bad, and this is the time to do it. So a lot of this is a delicate balance, and where we're going to put the money and why, and what's the best choice. It's always like that.
You know, once it's dry, I'll go ahead and clean up all the mating surfaces of the gaskets so that when we're ready to go, when all the parts come in, we can just get right back to going together. On these, I will use the 3M plastic discs. This is what I'll use to clean up these. Anything that's aluminum or cast aluminum, anything softer than steel, that's what I use on there. While I was at it, I took the wire wheel and cleaned up these steps. You remember back from the old last video, they were pretty rusty. So I wire wheeled them real good, gave them a coat of primer, and then I hit it with this Stone Guard Black. It's chip guard for like rockers and stuff, and it's really durable. I really like it, so I did both of them. They turned out, you know, better than they were. Not spectacular, but definitely an improvement. Now when I go to put this together, I'll put cardboard over top of this or something so I'm not stepping on it and scuffing it all up. It's a little premature, but I was waiting on somebody to show up, so I did that while I was waiting.
So I'm at the machine shop picking up the heads for the Duramax. The ISM head was done almost a week ago, and I just didn't come out to get it because this is over an hour drive for me, so I thought it was best just to hold off and get them both at the same time. I'm not going to be working on the ISM anytime soon anyway, so we're just going to set it off to the side.
So when I first take these in, they disassemble the heads, or actually they clean up the heads first, and then they pressure check the heads. So they're going to pressure check the orifices, the flatness, and make sure that there's no cracks in this head, in between here, anywhere, no cracks whatsoever. Once they decide that the head is good and not cracked, then they'll check for flatness. They're going to measure it and see how far out the head is, and then make a determination on the measurement of certain places, how thick it is, and how much material can be removed. This one, I believe, yeah, this is a passenger side head. This head was out 8/1000 in this area, right in here. The whole entire head was out 8/1000. And what that means is, in order to get a perfectly flat surface, they had to take 8/1000 off of the areas that weren't either sucked in or blowed out, whichever. I don't know which way it was. I assume it was dish this way, but I don't know. So they'll machine this, and then when they machine it, what ends up happening is the valves end up closer to the piston. So they have to set these valves. So they will grind the valve seats and the valves so that they're at the right depth on the back of here. And then when those end up needing to go farther into the seat, it makes the stem stick up farther. So then they have to grind the tops of the stems so that you have correct stem height. Otherwise, if you had too long a stem height, the rocker could come down and push on your valve and possibly hit your piston. So you have to make sure you have the right stem height. So after they're done with all that, now both of these heads got every single guide. All the guides were bad. It got all the keepers. Every valve was cleaned up and refaced. I don't think we replaced valves on this. And then, like I said, this head was milled. It was out 8/1000, so they took it down 10/1000 so I could use the 10/1000 thicker gasket for this side. And again, it's marked on here, so if you ever take it apart again, you know it's a 10/1000 additional gaskets required. This and this head over here, all they did was just surface the bottom, just clean it up. So they did all that same stuff and just cleaned the bottom up. So they didn't have to take anything off the bottom of that. And then they took that glow plug out. So not bad. Now it's time to get to work.
So by the time I got back to the shop, it was getting into the afternoon. I had a few other things to take care of. So here it's almost 3 o'clock, and we're going to try and get these heads set on. I'd like to get them put in place and torqued down. I don't know how much farther we'll be able to get after that, but we'll see. I really want to get this thing done. I don't want to rush through it because there's so many details, and I want to make sure we don't miss anything. But it is kind of clogging things up here. I really need to get this thing handled and get it on its way. I decided to go ahead and use those ARP head studs on this one. I've never been able to justify the cost of those things. I think it's highway robbery for what they are. But in this case, being though I read about these LLY Duramaxes that, basically have a constant head gasket problem, and I don't know if it's just people who like aftermarket parts or if there is something to it, but it seems the general consensus is the head studs help to prevent them from blowing head gaskets. I don't know. I don't care. I know the next guy, if he looks at it, the owner, the person this is going to, he may look at it as though, if you're doing this job, what's an extra 200 and some dollars if it prevents from having to do this big a job again? And that is the sole reason that I decided to do this, because anything I can do to prevent the next guy from having troubles, that's what I want to do. I spent a fortune on these heads. They've got all new guides, a couple seats, I believe. All the valves were okay, but they had to mill to one side, like we said. But there's a fortune in these heads and parts, so I don't want it to go to waste. I want it to all be, worthwhile. The ARP head studs, they send a package of special lubricant they want you to use when you're putting it together. They tell you to put the lubricant under the washer, between the washer and the head, and the washer and the nut, and also on the threads. On the threads of the part you're torquing. So they also say to put these in finger tight. And man, there's a lot of head bolts. So I ended up using my cordless ratchet, my snap-on, whatever it's called, battery ratchet, with an Allen socket, and I just ran them in. I'd get them started, and then I ran them in until I could just hear the battery ratchet start to change tone, like it was getting close, and I just stopped. And it worked out pretty good, because by the time we had it all torqued into place, we were really even on all the studs that were sticking up, so it worked out okay. The process of the torque sequence of this is basically start in the center, work in a circle, and working your way out to the outsides. They want you to do it in several steps. I actually did it in 4 steps. I used the battery ratchet to run them down until it would stop. Then I did, I think it was the first one was 50, then I went to 75, then I went to 100, then to 125. And I go over it several times just because I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Because if you torque this and you miss two and you're doing your circle rotation on the way out and you miss two, you don't get an accurate torque on the other two. So it takes a while. But this is the basis of what we're building on here, and it's got to be right. When I'm torquing cylinder heads, I typically count. I'll start with one in the center and just start counting all the way around. That way I know where I'm at and kind of keep a mental gauge of where I'm at based on what's left. And if I remember right, there's 18 head bolts here, so I knew that when I was around the edges, what number I should be on around there to kind of help me out. I did get screwed up a couple times, but I just went back over and just rechecked before I went any farther. Not a big deal. Just it's very important they're all consistent. So this takes me quite a long time. I've had a couple guys comment about my torque wrench because I use the old style torque wrenches. I don't use those new digital ones. I believe anytime you add technology to something that can be just simple, the potential for errors far higher. Simple's reliable. That's just the way I see it. And I'm not going to change torque wrenches until something happens that's absolutely necessary. They work just fine. I've had them calibrated several times and rechecked, and I don't have any issues with it. I'm putting some assembly lube on all the push rods and on top of the valve stems before I start putting this stuff together. I clean everything up real good before we put it together with brake parts cleaner, and I blow it dry. It's very important I blow it dry, because if you don't, the assembly lube I'm using won't stick to it. I'm setting the rack down in place. I've backed off all the adjusters. It's very important that these are backed off before you torque the rail down, because otherwise you're not getting accurate torque, because the torque that you're applying is being used to open valves instead of actually seat the bolt. Because imagine you've got 8 valve springs. Actually, what do you got? 2 per cylinder, or 2 exhaust is 16, and you're trying to overcome that while you torque the bolt down. So it's very important to back them off. We're gonna do the overhead later. I'm at a standstill right there. I want to look into the overhead a little bit more, but I don't want to roll the rockers or roll the crank over until I have both cylinder heads in and finished. Now on the other side, I'm just cutting through pieces here and there. It's the same thing, rinse and repeat. You can see I got all my push rods in. I'm putting the assembly lube on the rockers here. I cleaned them up and got them ready to go. And we'll put the rocker assembly in place. When I went to set this one in place, you know, typical things happen. You go to set it in place, and the ball of the rocker arm wasn't sitting exactly right in one of the push rod tubes. So, you know, didn't want to go in quite right. You just got to be careful and take your time. I go down through the whole entire thing, go and make sure that they're all sitting in there. If something's starting to go together and you're fighting it, you probably need to stop and, you know, regroup and look it all over again, because, you know, a simple mistake at this point of the game, this deep in the motor, it could really cause you a lot of grief. So here we are, we're going to torque this down, and it is here pretty soon I realized that I got the wrong headset. They sell these headsets, which, if you don't know what a headset is, it's a set of gaskets. It means if you're removing the heads, it's all the gaskets that you need to remove, to put them heads back on the engine the way they see fit, taking apart the things that only are required, just the necessary items to remove. Well, it's right about here that I'm realizing, after I get these glow plugs in, while I'm putting never sees on the glow plugs, um, I'm realizing that I got the wrong gaskets. The application says C4500 from 2004 up to, I can't remember what year, but it's 2004. This truck's a 2005. Well, apparently the listing is incorrect, because that's not an LLY. It has a completely different rocker, the lower rocker gasket. This one has a metal shim that goes up around the injectors. Well, the gasket set we have is for the older version Duramax, and it doesn't have the right gaskets. So I sent an email to the company it came from to tell them, you know, you got us the wrong gaskets, blah, blah, so on and so forth. And basically, they tell me that if you opened it, we can't return it. How in the world am I going to know in a cardboard box that something is wrong if I don't open it? I mean, sometimes these companies are just ridiculous. This isn't my mistake. This is their mistake. Their listing is wrong. Why should it cost me money? So I called Napa, and I thought, well, maybe I can just get those rocker cover gaskets, the lower rockers. So I ordered them up. They were 50 bucks. So I got those, and I was able to move forward, just to find out that, you know, there's so many more pieces that are not right in this kit. So I had Napa get me another headset. So there was another $284 for another headset. So now in gaskets, I think we're sitting somewhere around $500 in gaskets, and we'll see if we can get a credit on the others. It's not right, you know. It wasn't my mistake. It's theirs. I'm putting the glow plugs in, just snugging them up with a hand ratchet. They all went in beautiful. They got that broken one out, no troubles. The threads were perfect. Really worked out well. So now that I'm right now exactly, I'm on the phone with Napa, and trying to move forward with the next piece of this, because I'm pretty aggravated. And I figure, well, since I'm going to be waiting, I'm going to go ahead and move forward with a few other things that need taken care of, and one of them is going to be the cooling fan. It has some damage to the fins that I noticed, so I ordered up a new fan for the fan clutch. That 50% mechanic is alive and well here too. I obviously took this fan shroud off before. It's meant to take off the top half, and you can take the fan clutch assembly and fan right out the top real easy. Took out half of them and took the sawzall or something and cut the top of the fan shroud. I'm gonna have to see if I can source one of them. I wish I'd seen that earlier so I could have had it, but it is what it is. You'll see when I take this out, I'll show you the damages in the fan blades. Looks like a metal strap or something got in there, like from a wiring harness, because one piece is embedded in one of the blades, and there's like 4 or 5 blades that are just damaged, big chunks missing, cracks, so on and so forth. So I get it out of here and take it apart. I got a new one. It's aftermarket. It was high enough in cost, that's for sure. The parts bill on this is one thing for the repairs, but there's a whole nother parts list or amount that's piling up from replacing all the stuff that the damages and the things that the last guy did wrong. You know, it's just horrible. So after I get this fan clutch in, I end up doing the overhead. Now, I didn't record the overhead because I am not a Duramax guru. I am not a guy that's had these apart a bunch of times, and it's not that I'm not confident that I can do it right. It's just the fact that I don't think I want to do this and someone else watch. And if I make a mistake, it's on my dime. I don't want someone to look at it and think that, man, he must know what he's doing, because I just don't. I'm going to be reading out of a book just like someone else doing this, you know, and I may make a mistake. So I didn't video it, but it's very important that it gets done, because these are not these are adjustable rockers. You can see the nut and the screwdriver head up on the top of the rockers here in the video, and they're there for a reason. You know, they need to be adjusted. So I didn't video it. You guys, if you need to do this on yours, you should probably find someone who's more experienced and more versed in these things that is you feel comfortable with, that's for sure. But I'm almost done with this. I got the old fan clutch off, and I wanted to use a little thread locker in the fan clutch itself where the bolts go through. So I put a little dab of the blue stuff in there. I didn't use red, I used the blue. I dropped it down into the fan clutch and then put the bolts in. Um, it goes together simple. You got to put the fan clutch back on the water pump. It's a clockwise rotation. Goes on pretty easy. Oh, you can see some more of the damage here. It's pretty easy to see now. Um, yeah, I'm sure that affect the cooling too. You had a bunch of fans that were busted and cracked and not moving air like it should. So, you know, we need to make sure that's taken care of. But anyways, it's a clockwise rotation. Goes on real simple. When I put this on, once I get the accessories back on, the belts on there, I'll take my Lyle uh, fan clutch air hammer attachment, and I'll put it on there. I'll give it a couple taps just to make sure it's good and tight. A lot of guys think you can just spin that on there and the engine will tighten up itself and that's good enough, but yeah, I'm not happy with that. I want to know it's tight for sure because I don't want it coming off. That is a very expensive radiator. So after I do this, this is about it for the day, and I'm going to be waiting on parts anyway, so I go ahead and run the overhead that night, and we'll pick up on this later. The next part of this video will be putting the rest of the top of the motor together, and then all the other problems that we run into along with that, because they are just piling up. Anyways, guys, that's it for this one. If you like what we're doing, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Stick around for the next part. We'll show you putting the rest of it together.